Parzival, Chapter 5, The Lost Night. Over thousands of dreary miles Parzival rode and rode, this way and that, across the world. Whether on the sorrel's back, or on a ship borne forward by wind and waves, he saw nothing to cheer him. When challenged, he raised his lance or drew his sword. But why mention these savorless struggles as though they had been adventures? There was no honor for him now in conquest. He never knew defeat. He must not. He did not care for his life. That was of little worth to him now. He fought only to rid his trail of obstruction. Dogged as an ancient wolf on the scent of its last quarry, this one last thing I will track down, then lay me down upon the earth to die. 4 years and more he roamed the earth, the world, his bones aching with weariness, his heart sick with longing, his soul heavy with despair. Searching, his eyes strained and searching for a castle that would not let itself be found. He did not know the year or the day, or even whether it was night or day, when he came upon a tiny house, more like a cell freshly built in the wilderness through which he rode. There was a light in its one small window, which drew him toward it. Perhaps, he thought dully, I should ask directions, for as usual he had no notion of where he was. "Is anyone there?" he called. "Yes." Hearing a woman's voice, Parzival dismounted, tethered the sorrel to a nearby tree, and unbound his sword. Then he went to the window. Inside he saw a woman at what seemed to be her prayers. When she saw him there, she rose from her knees and came to meet him at the window grate. She was dressed like one who has given her life to God. But on the hand that carried her psalter, Parzival saw a ring with a sparkling gemstone, not the kind of ring a woman sworn to poverty would wear. He must be careful, he thought. This woman is not what she appears to be. And he stared through the bars of the window into the cell. As he stared through the bars of the window into the cell, he saw no cooking pots or utensils, nor was there any garden where food might be grown. "Madam," he asked, "how is it you can live here alone in the wilderness?" "You need not worry about my food. Every Saturday, Kundry, the sorceress, brings me food enough for a week from the table at Wild Mountain. Alas, if food were my only concern." At the mention of Wild Mountain, Parzival's long-dead heart gave a shudder. The lady went on, "I see, sir, that you stare at my ring. It was given to me by the knight I was pledged to marry, but to my eternal grief, he was killed before we were wed. In God's eyes, nonetheless, I am his bride, and will be so forever. That is why I continue to wear his ring. His body lies below that very spot where you espied me on my knees in prayer." When Parzival heard this, he realized that the grief-aged woman in the cell was his cousin Segun. He took off his helmet, and she recognized him at once. "You are Parzival," she said. "Well, cousin, how has it fared for you? Do you know by now the meaning of the Grail?" "I have found nothing but unhappiness in that quest," he said. "Cousin, if you knew how much I have suffered. I have been parted from my wife, who is more to me than life. I have lost honor with my fellows. Do not go too hard on me." "I no longer think of you as my enemy," Segun said gently. "It is plain to see how much you have lost by failing to ask wretched Afortus the question." "God himself was against me," Parzival said, "or I would have fared other than I did. But tell me how it goes with you. My burden is so heavy, I will not even feel it if you lay yours upon me as well." "Dear cousin," Segun said, "I pray that God, who is the source of all comfort, will comfort you." To this Parzival did not answer. Segun continued, "Would it be possible, I wonder, to follow a track to Wild Mountain, and thus find your way there once again? Kundry the sorceress was here not long ago. The track of her mule is still fresh in the underbrush if you follow it." Parzival took hasty leave of Segun, mounted the sorrel, and found the hoofprints of Kundry's enormous mule. He followed them through the woods along a narrow path that wound high above a deep chasm. Perhaps his heart was now full wakened in his breast. Perhaps today he would find that cursed castle. "Halt there!" A knight was barring the path. "Who are you who dares beat a track through my lord's forest?" he cried out. "Don't you know that you court-martial danger when you come too close to Wild Mountain?" The knight was fully armored, and rode a great black war-horse. From the turtle-doves embossed on his shield, it was clear that he had come from the castle itself. There was no room on the path for a proper joust, but the knight came charging toward him nonetheless. They struck lance upon lance, and backed and charged and struck again, until in one final charge Parzival knocked the knight off his horse into the chasm. But in the lunge Parzival could not hold the sorrel back, and it plunged off the path as well. As horse and rider fell into the chasm, Parzival grabbed the branch of a tree and hung there, watching helplessly as his beloved red sorrel rolled and crashed against the scrub and through the underbrush to break its neck at last on the rocks at the bottom of the crevasse. Meantime, the castle knight clambered up the opposite bank, headed no doubt for the safety of Wild Mountain and the comforts of the Grail. Sorrow upon sorrow. Now his only companion was dead, and he no nearer the end of his quest than before. Slowly and painfully Parzival climbed up the slope to the path, and there, waiting for him, its reins dangling down through invitation, was the great black war-horse from Wild Mountain. Parzival swung up into the saddle. He had lost his lance, his sorrel, his hope, but he clung to the powerful flanks of the war-horse. And in the rhythmic stride and proud head, he found a true friend for many a year to come. And we are going to pause.